I don't care. Everyone is coming on the official trip, and whoever doesn't want to come is off the team, team leader Eric announced. We looked at him with annoyance because he always said this. He doesn't care about the opinions of the rest of the team. He simply decides on his own, takes permission from the higher-ups, and says that the team wants this, the team wants that, and simply just informs us that we have to do this. I wonder who wants to stay on this team, I whispered, which was overheard by the person sitting next to me, Carlos, and he tried to control his laughter. Is there anything you would like to say, Carlos? The team leader noticed him laughing and asked. Yes, why don't we all have a pre-trip overnight party on our floor? He suggested, while trying to steal his eyes away from me because I was glaring at him for giving him ideas. What an amazing idea, Carlos. Okay, everyone, tomorrow you will all bring your PJs to the office because we will be drinking all night, and no excuse for anyone. As he announced this, I sneakily smacked Carlos when no one was looking. Everyone else nodded their heads in agreement because they had no other choice. After the shift ended, I grabbed Carlos's hand and pulled him into the smoking area. Are you mad or what? You know how he is, and I have zero alcohol tolerance, right? Why the hell would you suggest such a thing? I smacked his back 3 times while saying this angrily, but he continued smiling. I just wanted to see your reaction, and how else would I be able to see your angry bird side? He laughed and said, which made me even angrier, and I started punching and kicking him, but he continued laughing. I got annoyed and stomped out of there. I was frustrated that the only days we get to rest after working like a horse were supposed to be wasted on overnight parties or some stupid office trip. The next morning, I saw the message in the team group that was sent by Eric that everyone was supposed to bring their luggage along with the PJs for the trip because we would head directly from there. He was just getting more and more annoying, I thought, and threw myself on the bed again. After a while, I got up and started packing my things half-heartedly. When I was done, I called Carlos, and even though I was still angry with him, he was still my best friend, and I could always kill him later. Hello, my angry bird. He said this to annoy me on purpose, but I wasn't going to show him my annoyance yet. You're coming to pick me up, understood? I said. This doesn't sound like a request to me, he said in a playful tone. Because this is an order, not a request. Now, be here within half an hour. I'll be waiting. I hung up after saying that. When I was ready, I exited my house and locked it. I checked the time, and 3 minutes remained for the time limit I gave Carlos. That was when I saw his car stopping in front of the front gate. I knew he would come, because no matter how annoying he was still a good friend to me. He came out and walked toward me. You know the trip is only for 3 days, right? He asked, looking at my suitcase. Don't worry, the suitcase is half empty. I just didn't have any other ones, so I took this, I said while handing him my suitcase, and he acted as if it was too heavy for him. I smacked his head for that reaction, and he started laughing. He put the suitcase in the car, and we got in after that. We drove to the office and saw the team leader standing near the parking area. His expression changed as soon as he saw us together. He always does this. He makes it so obvious that he is interested in me to the point that it makes me uncomfortable. We headed inside the office, and after putting our suitcase and bags in a safe place, we started working. In the evening, the team leader came with the bottles of alcohol in his hands and placed them in the kitchen. After that, he called us, saying that we should start the party. I knew that he was going to try to force me to drink, so I made Carlo drink at my place because it was all his stupid idea anyway. We played multiple games and continued drinking as a result, getting extremely drunk. I couldn't spot Carlos for a while, and that was when the team leader came toward me with a glass in his hand and started forcing me to drink. You were the only one who did not drink properly, so you have to drink from my hands. I refused him, but he kept insisting. He looked pretty drunk because he had started to grab my hands and I kept pulling them away from him. I tried to get away from him, but this time he grabbed my waist and pulled me closer. He forcefully put the glass in my mouth and made me drink. That was when Carlos came and pushed him away from me. "Are you okay?" That was the first thing he asked. He looked at my eyes, which were torn up, and it made him angry. He grabbed Eric by his collar and punched him in the face. Eric was so drunk that he passed out in that one punch. The next morning, everyone woke up completely hungover and blacked out from last night. I asked Carlos not to make this into an issue and let him be this time. That was when the team leader received a call from the director saying that the trip had been canceled because some essential data and files were stolen from the department. He was immediately called to the meeting, and since he was so hungover, he had no idea what was going on. The next day, the team leader came and gathered his things because he was fired from his position. As he was going, he glared at me and Carlos. I could not understand the entire situation, so I looked over at Carlos in confusion and saw him smiling, which made me doubtful about him. He turned his face to me and winked, which made me understand what he was doing all along. Finally, this buffoon did something good. I smiled back and went back to work. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. It was the day when my boss asked me the most bizarre article to publish about the LGBTQ+ community, since they had always been so private and secretive about themselves. By the way, in my opinion, it was not true. I had seen them being open and oversharing about themselves, but my boss wanted to go undercover and get along with them to get the inner scoop for the article. He did not give me a clear point about what it was that I was supposed to look for. Instead, he just said, "You'll know when you find it." It was frustrating for me to work with him any longer, but since I needed the experience to get a bigger opportunity, I had no other choice. As he instructed, I downloaded Tinder and created a profile for myself. I put my sexual preference on bi and started to wait for the moment when someone gets matched with me. In the meantime, I asked my other gay and lesbian friends some questions about their lives, but whatever answer they gave me did not seem to satisfy me. It was Thursday afternoon when I got matched with a girl named Julie, who had put on her profile that she was a lesbian. As I chatted with her, she told me that she was not satisfied with her sexuality and was thinking of transitioning. I got a strong urge to talk some sense into her and explain to her that she could love her the way she is, but I couldn't because there was a huge possibility it could blow up my cover. So I played along and tried to act as naturally as I could. She also told me that she had recently accepted herself and broke up with her boyfriend because she no longer felt attracted to him. That is when she felt she was a lesbian. It felt similar to my other gay and trans friends, so I figured not being comfortable in their skin the way we do must be something these people might have in common among themselves. Anyway, she told me she did not want to rush into a relationship so soon, and thinking of taking things slow, which was good for me because that way I could not be feeling too guilty about using her for my article. So we started as friends and continued to engage in chatting daily. I soon found out she was 19 years old and figured she might have made a rash decision by rushing into these sexual identity things, but except for feeling guilty, there was nothing else I could do. There was no way I was going to risk my job over this. You can call me selfish for this, but it was the right thing to do for myself. One evening, my boss called me to inform me that I was taking too much time, and as a result of his impatience, he was transferring the project to someone else. For some reason, I felt a heavy burden getting lifted off my chest because I was tired of deceiving Julie, and I did not want to do that anymore. Now all I needed was to come clean to her, but I did not have enough guts for it, so I simply avoided opening Tinder. 2 weeks later, I got a text from her asking me out on a date, which I agreed to because it was the perfect opportunity for me to tell her everything. We agreed to meet in a cafe in the evening, and she told me she would be wearing a green dress. When I saw the girl introducing herself to me as Julie, I couldn't help but think she looked older than the age she told me. But the way she was talking and holding up the conversation, I was sure it was the same girl I had been chatting with the past few days. She seemed nice and bubbly, so I figured I might be wrong about her age. "Hey, want to come with me to see something nice?" As we were about to say goodbye to each other, she suggested. I wanted to deny it, but I was already feeling enough guilt about not being able to tell her the truth, so I agreed. She walked me to her car and started talking about her childhood as we got in. As she was driving me to the area which seemed secluded, she started telling me how she murdered her gardener when she was 17. I started panicking and asked her to stop the car, but she turned her head to me and said, "Did you think I believed your story of being from the LGBTQ+ community? Hell, even I am not one of them. I was just looking for prey." Her face seemed so monstrous with that evil smile that it freaked me out completely. "Why are you doing this to me?" I said with my voice trembling as I kept panicking. "Oh no, honey, don't be mistaken. None of this is your fault except matching with me on Tinder. It's just that I love seeing others in pain." As she said that, she took out a gun and pointed it at my head. Guess she figured I was planning to jump off the car, so she did not hesitate once to fire the bullet in injuring my left hand. I let out a loud, painful scream, and in response, she moaned and started laughing, which was even more terrifying. I had to do something if I wanted to get myself out of this messy situation, but I could not figure out what to do. That was when my head stopped working, and I simply started wrestling her to take the gun away from her. As I was already in pain and bleeding, I wasn't going to hold out any longer, so I somehow managed to make her lose the balance of the car. As a result, we got into an accident, but she was a tough one. Even after getting injured, she was still holding up, while I was barely keeping myself conscious in the situation. As my vision faded, I heard someone rushing toward the car, and the fading voice of the girl trying to murder me. "No, sir, everything is fine. I will call an ambulance myself. You don't..." These sentences are followed by a gunshot, and everything went blank after that. When I woke up, I was in an emergency room, and a man was sitting across from me. I turned my head, only to find out that the girl was lying unconscious on the bed next to me. The man told me he was driving past us when he saw the accident, but when he went to help us, the other girl tried to kill him. As she pointed the gun at him, he acted quickly, and the bullet accidentally got fired into her stomach. Even after that, he called the ambulance on us and got us admitted to the emergency room. The police came and got my statement. I ended up telling them everything that had happened the past few days. And as I got discharged, the first thing I did was quit my job, which was the cause of my suffering. One thing I was sure of, though, was that bullet in Julie's stomach was not an accident. That guy intended to do that. After a thorough investigation, it was revealed that Julie had conditions of IED, APD, etc., which were developed at a very young age when she was being forced to live the life of a guy by her parents. She killed them and ended up in a mental hospital. But it was 6 months ago when she ran away from there and started killing people. I felt relieved that I got out of the situation when I did. Otherwise, God knows what might have happened to me.
I got a few work-related stories from my hometown I can post. This first one happened when I was a 20-year-old college student. At the time, I worked in a, let's say, rustic-looking gas station. It wasn't a building by itself either. Rather, it acted more like a booth that was attached to a supermarket. The booth itself is located a bit off-site on the other side of this huge parking lot, but the supermarket owns it. The booth faces the store, but it has a huge woodland area directly behind it. The door to the booth faces left into the woods, and I know I'm being overly specific, but this is important. so the window in the booth is bulletproof but only covers the front so you can't see directly to the left or right of the booth. At the time of this experience, I'd been working at the station for maybe a few months, when all of a sudden, this nasty storm hit the area one night. The rain was so bad that you could barely see 10 feet in front of you, and it was flooding all over the place. But the supermarket, being desperate for money, refused to close the booth down, so I showed up for my typical 5 to 11 p.m. shift in the pouring rain. 3 hours into my shift, the power goes out due to the storm, which by this point has gotten downright apocalyptic. It's pitch black out there, and the rain is coming down hard, so I decided to sit tight in the booth while I wait for a manager or something to either let me go or to fix the power. Of course, this means the phones are down, so I can't call in the store, and nobody in their right mind is buying gas, so I decided to start doing my booth chores like cleaning the counter, counting cigarettes, tidying the drawer, etc. Now, this next part will require a bit more background information, so bear with me. The booth itself is supposed to be locked at all times, but one of the new hires managed to break the key off inside the lock, making one of our managers break the lock so we all could get back inside. That lock still hadn't been replaced, but we were told to pretend the door was still locked. The door still had a deadbolt, but I found it annoying to fool with, so I mostly just left it unlocked. Whenever I'd go to open the door, I'd pretend to put the key in and make an audible ksh sound like a lock being opened. Anyway, back to me sitting in the unlocked booth in the pitch black pouring rain. I'm in the middle of my chores when I hear something outside the booth, like a muffled sort of splashing sound. Again, there is zero visibility, so I press my ear against the door and I can clearly hear someone walking around the booth, in the rain, before stopping in front of the door. Before I can kick myself for not locking it, I hear that ksh sound, followed by the most dreadfully quiet couple of seconds. I'm just waiting to die at the hands of some deranged serial killer or crackhead, when suddenly, the footsteps start splashing back into the woods. I quietly soil myself as I race to lock the deadbolt and I wait out my shift. I would occasionally hear the footsteps outside, but it never tried to open the door. Finally, my manager drives over in a truck to close me out for the night. Since I'm still kind of new here, I didn't want to seem like I was delusional or crazy or that I was a crackhead, so I never mentioned it to him or anyone else at the store. A few months later, this kid I was training told me he'd heard footsteps real late one night during a storm, and thankfully, the lock had been replaced since then. I just tell him it was nothing, but not to open the door if he thinks there is something out there. Not because I didn't want to look delusional, but because I can't explain this phenomenon. Now fast forward a couple of months, and I'm still working at the booth. By this point, I'm the second oldest person working there, so sometimes I'd get calls from younger coworkers when they accidentally mess up. On this particular night I was off, but I still got a call from this high schooler who I'll call Rhea. I look at the time and it's 9:30, so I sigh and pick up the phone, and before I can even get into what happened, Rhea is in hysterics, saying something about her trainee being missing, and then lots of sobbing. Confused, if not a little agitated that she called me first, I try to get her to call the cops or something if he's been kidnapped, but she insists that she can't call the cops because they wouldn't believe her. So, my next line of thinking is to ask her why she hasn't told a manager, and she cries some more and says that they wouldn't understand. More agitated than confused, I agreed to go out there and calm her down. I get dressed, go out there, and park next to the booth. There were no customers around, and the girl was just standing in the booth, staring at the door. She spots me, opens the door, and starts sobbing, telling me to hurry inside. Eventually, I got her to stop crying long enough to tell me what happened. Apparently, she was training this new guy, Matt, who was an older guy about my age, and she said, the dude felt off, like a robot or something, and kept staring at her all dazed. Several times he would stop talking mid-sentence and ignored her attempts to address it. At this point, she's getting real uncomfortable and is about to call into the store about him when he starts sort of humming, she says. She described it as kind of like as if someone was attempting to imitate a purring cat, like they were breathing heavily and buzzing at the same time. So she reaches for the phone, and he reacts by grabbing her hand and just staring at her. She starts bawling at this point, begging him to stop, and he lets go of her hand, then opens the door and just sprints off into the woods out of sight. She said he came back a few minutes just before I got there and asked to be let back in, but she refused, so he just ran back into the woods. At this point, I'm either thinking he picked up on the meth phase that the neighborhood was slinging around or that she's being dramatic. Regardless, the story sounded pretty dangerous and we needed to call the cops or something at least. I tell her we're going to call the cops and then we're going to walk outside and wait for them, but she doesn't want to go outside. She says that she can almost feel him waiting out there. Tired, irritated, and not really buying the story, I just say screw it. She can stay in the booth and call the cops while I make sure the tree line is clear. I take this weak little flashlight that I stashed out there after the first story and go outside to start scanning the tree line. I barely begin shining the light around when suddenly the hair stands up on the back of my neck as I hear this humming noise. She described it rather well too, because it sounded kind of like cicadas mixed with breathing. I look inside the booth and she's curled up in the chair, staring to my left. I didn't even look where she was staring, I just immediately booked it back to get inside. But I left the keys with her, and she's not getting up to let me in. I'm pounding on the door while screaming at her to let me in, and the humming stops abruptly as I hear something behind me and to the left. It's Matt. He's standing just on the edge of the trees. My panic intensifies, and at this point, Rhea finally lets me into the booth, and I immediately deadbolt the thing shut. All of a sudden, Matt is right outside asking to be let back in. He says he's sorry, and that he got a bit nervous back there, and he begins circling the booth while he just repeats the same couple of excuses, asking to come in. This continues for maybe 5 minutes before the cops arrive, and Matt just begins to run off into the woods again. I end up having to explain to both the cops and our manager what happened, leaving out the weird humming. As far as I know, Matt never showed up, so they fired him and Rhea quit eventually, and that was the end of it. I was never particularly close to Rhea since she was still in high school when I was in college, so we never got to talk about what happened. I have no idea what happened that night though. Maybe Matt was just some doped up meth junkie who was capable of making some really weird noises. I'll never know. I guess it could explain why he bolted out of there when the cops began to show up, but that day is still quite a mystery to my mind.
Back in the 90s, I was working at this call center, and I was the manager at, and we had a lot of calls that came in every day. And our office was located right in the center of a hospital and coffin cellar. It was a small rental place, and we were selling pinky stocks to people. So our office wasn't really the high-end office like them stock exchanges, and it was a low-rent place and really weird place to have an office at, between a hospital and a coffin shop. I was the night shift manager, and I didn't like, but it paid better than the day shift and the staff was less, so it wasn't difficult to manage them all. Day shift was a pain in the ass to manage, and I wasn't ready for that. We had these small coffee breaks in the night where we would just sit outside the office and see the hospital all busy, and even the coffin shop would stay busy most of the times. People would walk across from the hospital to the coffin shop, and being there in the night shift, you would witness it all. It was weird that we did that, but it was very thought-levitating, and we all enjoyed deep conversation in those small coffee breaks of contemplation. Even the employees that worked the night might look weird to the outside world, but they were much deeper in their thinking than compared to the day shift staff, and I managed them both, and I liked the night staff much better. This one day, when there weren't people at the shift because of the flu, there was a flu going around and it hit the office. Most of the employees were down with it, and only a handful were able to attend the office. And we were keeping busy that night since there were a handful of us and a lot of phone calls to handle. The night was too busy, and it was all chaos in there. We were handling calls for our friends. It was a tight night, and we were squeezing in as much call time as we can to hit the night's target. We had to stay ahead from the day shift team. It was important. We were hitting the targets right and were ahead than the team, and were making sure we kept the lead, and that is why we were working our best to do that. So after a continuous call answering and making the lead by working 4 hours straight without stopping, we arranged a break for everyone and ordered pizza and Coke, and decided to head out and eat by the tables outside the office, and it was a great one. Everyone deserved that. When we got out there, we saw that even the hospital was quiet today, and the coffin shop closed, and it was one of those calm nights that were full of sweet melancholy, and we relaxed and sat on the tables, all of us staring in the distance, just enjoying our pizza and Cokes. It was a great night. And then, a man approached us. He asked if we knew when the coffin shop will open. We had no idea, so we told him. But then the man still kept on walking towards the shop, and then we just walked right past the door, and we were all astonished. We thought that the shop was closed, and then around 10 minutes later, the man walked back from the shop and said to us, "When my son comes, you will know. Tell him that I want the blue marbled coffin." And the man just kept walking towards the hospital. We were just dazed with everything weird that was going on. And then around a half hour later, when we were able to get inside, a young man asked us, "Excuse me, is the coffin shop open yet?" And I said, "No, it is closed today. It will remain closed today." And the man looked disappointed. And just out of the feeling in my gut, I said, "Your father wanted the blue marbled coffin." And he stopped and asked me, "What?" And then I told him the story about a man who just walked in a few minutes earlier. Then the man said, "You must be mistaken. My father died this morning. You must have mistaken me for someone else." And then I don't know why I did, but I asked the man to show us the photograph of his father. And then he took out his phone and showed us, and we were stunned. It was in fact his father, and the man was shocked. How could we have all seen the same man? And then we realized it was the ghost of the dead man, trying to convey the one final wish.